Hello, and welcome to this behind the scenes session on writing your own book, and specifically writing a book that will actually drive your business, because we're not talking about writing a vanity project book that used to be a thing when self-publishing first came along. This is not just something, to feel good about yourself, I suppose, although you absolutely can do once you've written a book. It's not a memoir. It's not a novel either. So it really is a book that's going to fit into your ecosystem, feed into your programs, and that's what we're specifically looking at today. But it's still exciting. It's still something I know that many of you want to do, and in particular, obviously, you're here watching this. So I hope this session will be full of insights, strategies, tidbits for you to write your very own book. And maybe you've already started, and this will give you that little extra push to get going. I will say it's a really informal session. I've got some notes, but I'm basically going to talk you through my own experience of now publishing a few different books actually along the way, and my advice to you. There are lots of options out there. There's no right or wrong answer, but I'll talk you through some of the considerations that you want to think about. So my name's Anna Lindberg. For those of you who don't know me, I am now the author of these two books that I'm particularly proud of. So Outside the 9 to 5 has just been published in 2023, or strictly speaking, end of December 2022, and Leaving the Corporate 9 to 5 was my first sort of proper business book in 2018. In fact, I did have the ambition, optimistically, to publish a book a year, but as you'll discover yourself, writing a fully fledged book of sort of 300 pages is not something you necessarily do once a year. You could, but it needs to really be your main focus, and maybe it's not the right thing, and that's what you need to think about for you. I have another book, which my friend and I, my former colleague and I, wrote together. It was How to Succeed in Your First Job. It's a thinner book. It's full of tips for people starting their job, ironically. It's from sort of a former project that we started back when we first quit our jobs. I don't share it as broadly because it doesn't fit strategically into my business, but it still sells a few copies every month. It's still being used and hopefully of value to people. And of course, that experience really set me up for success, I think, in publishing my real books, as I like to call them. And I like to say that I can now call myself an author. It's pretty tough, imposter syndrome never goes away. But I think I've got 3 books, and in fact 4 books, because my university dissertation is also on Amazon. If you check out my Amazon Author Central, and so I feel like I now have a pile of books to my name, and I'm going to call myself an author, which is exciting. I'm not quite ready to introduce myself as Anna Lundberg, the author, but only because I think it's a part of my identity rather than the sole identity. But anyway, let's get straight into it. So Outside the 9 to 5 is my fully fledged strategic thinking around designing and building a life and business outside the 9 to 5. So this is years of consolidated strategies, experience from myself, from working with clients. It's my framework. Some of them are new for the book, actually. Certainly they're all formalized for the book. Some have been around for some time. You may recognize them if you've been part of my community. But certainly I'm really, really proud of this. This is the pinnacle of my expertise right now in this particular area of designing and building that business that's going to be profitable and enjoyable and really give you that freedom, flexibility, and fulfillment that I always talk about. I do want to, in this behind the scenes, though, go back to my sort of first proper book, which is Leaving the Corporate 9 to 5. I had the ambition to write a book, as you, I'm sure, do as well. And I thought this would be the easy option. And to some extent it is, and we'll talk about this a bit later. So I already had a series of blog interviews with people who had quit their jobs. And although I wanted to write this big, meaningful, mission-driven, purpose-driven book on reimagining success, it was going to be my big work that I'd be remembered for. I thought, actually, you know what, I just want to get something out there, and perfectionism, procrastination, whatever it was preventing me from doing that. And so I decided that the easier option would be to collect together these stories and get it out. Of course, it still wasn't easy, but it did mean I had the content already, and from sort of a confidence standpoint, I was presenting other people's stories. So it wasn't, hey, I'm the expert on this and so on. I became the expert. I presented myself as an expert indirectly by introducing these other people's stories. So October 2018, that came out. And then, I've had a few detours along the way. I have been working on some other things, including having 2 children and moving and doing all sorts of other things, developing programs and so on. And actually, they say that things happen at the right time. I'm really glad this has come out now, because I feel like I have the programs, the website and everything behind it, the frameworks and so on, the graphic design, the personal brand, to really support it. So those are the two books. Now I want to start with, and I do have a workbook that I will send you a link to. There are some questions there, so you can answer those sort of as you go, but probably I'd suggest that you have a listen, take some notes, there's space to take notes as well, and then you can fill in those questions afterwards to see how you get on. But at least some prompts now to begin with. And my first one is really your why. As Simon Sinek says, start with why. And what's interesting with that one, by the way, is that Simon Sinek, of course, will always be known for start with why, even though he's written lots of other books. He's got a podcast. He talks about all sorts of other things. So it does sort of go contrary to my advice to some extent that you do need to think about what that book is that you want to be known for, because if you do have that big sort of initial platform, then you want to think carefully about what that's going to be. Obviously mine are around leaving the corporate 9 to 5 and so on. Now, having said that, they're not New York Times bestsellers and so on, right? So it's not that I'll be locked into that. It's not that millions of people know me for this and I can't move into anything else. But if I wanted to shift direction, that's something to consider. But knowing your why, and the reason why this is so important is, first of all, you need to understand the strategy behind the book. And again, if you want to write something to share with your family, or to to be an author, to have the ego and the prestige of having something traditionally published, and no judgment, because I certainly want that as well at some point, then that's something different to, okay, no, I actually have a really specific reason for my business. So for me personally, I've always wanted to be a writer. So there is that bigger dream of being a writer, an author, and so on. So there's that bigger why, bigger pull, bigger purpose on the one hand. From a business perspective, though, I wanted, and this is true for both of them, this to be sort of a business card, right? Writing a book is a big endeavor, again, as you'll discover. And even if it's just a smaller ebook, it immediately gives you a platform. It gives you that credibility to say, hey, I've written this book. Right away, you can give that to people. They'll be impressed, suitably so. So that's already a great piece of your credibility, right? It's a business card. It's a credibility source as a platform goes. So that's a big why for me as well. And secondly, this one, and this is a great strategy that I'd recommend if you want to drive people to your business. Leaving the corporate 9 to 5 officially is feeding people into my business incubator, which is my flagship program. So there is, at the end of each sort of section, there's a link saying, remember that if you want extra support when taking your first steps, you can sign up to my free audio training to help you move forwards, onestepaside.com/9to5 book. Now, that audio training, I'm not maintaining it. I don't love it now anymore, now years later. So I've redirected to my 10 steps roadmap, which is my latest best resource. But the idea is to get people to take that next step, to get a workbook, to do an audio series, watch a video, download something, maybe a supporting worksheet that helps them with the book. And ultimately, this is written for people who are in their corporate jobs, who want to be inspired by these stories, who then would be perfect candidates for my business incubator program, which takes people from being in their corporate job, having that idea to start a business, right through to actually running that business and having clients and so on. So that's designed to feed people into the business incubator. And you could say this one is too, but I've now launched my self-paced course, the Outside of Business Academy, and that's sort of an easier sell, as it were, from the book to, rather than sell someone into a £10,000 program, let's say, which I'm sure is totally possible. But here it's a book that costs maybe £8 on Amazon, and then buying my course, which is then £500 as of recording. And so that's a really great next step. It's basically the course in book form, or you could say the course is the book in course form. So they're perfect partners, and I've written them with that in mind. So for me, I love writing. It's the credibility, it's the business cards. And finally, it actually feeds into those specific programs, right? So really think about, why is it that you want to write the book? What is your bigger why? And then what is the role of the book within your business ecosystem? What's the next step for people? For all of us, it'll be sort of what we used to call it in my corporate job, a point of market entry. So it's a great first commitment to people. It's a great first step to say to people, oh, if they're asking you, how do I do this? Well, actually, or how do I work with you? Well, the best thing to do is grab my book. It really walks you through my whole process and so on, depending on what you've written. So that's the first one, your why. The second thing is the mindset. So I don't want to rain in your parade, but my way of thinking about this is that it's not going to be on the New York Times bestseller list. And maybe I'm selling myself short, but I'm working on the assumption that I don't have the budget or time or network or whatever audience to get to that position. And that's not my ambition. I'm wanting to have this as, again, as part of my ecosystem, gradually, slowly, steadily building that library of books that I've written, feeding into my programs on specific topics that I want. I want to have full control over that. And I know that I'm not going to be on the New York Times bestseller. For this one, I also knew I wasn't going to even be on the Amazon bestseller. No judgment to people who do this, but there are lots of articles and guides and so on how to game the system. I sort of tried half-heartedly to do it for the first book, and I certainly got a lot of reviews. I got into the top, whatever it was, I can't remember. This time around, I didn't. Partly I was ill and I just wanted to get the book out, and I sort of did a soft launch and so on. But partly out of authenticity, because in order to get people to actually review your book on the day of launch, you need to have obviously sent them the PDF before you've even launched it. You need to get them to, I think, have read the whole book and then write an actual review. And so, you can absolutely do that. And there are lots of guides as to how to do that. You get a launch team together and you get them all to support you and so on. And best of luck to you. I think it's becoming a little bit disingenuous when people now say they're an Amazon bestseller. Someone I very much respect the other day posted a screenshot, and I couldn't for the life of me find on Amazon what bestseller list they were on. But again, if that's what you want to be able to say to people, which is perfectly reasonable, and people do still find that very impressive, if you want to say you're an Amazon bestseller, then there are strategies to do that. But for me, at least, I've said it wasn't going to be a New York Times whatever kind of bestseller. It wasn't going to be an Amazon bestseller. Another piece on I talked about procrastination and perfectionism is, in terms of your mindset, it does no one any good sitting in your drafts folder on your computer or in your head, right? So don't try to write the best ever book that has everything that anyone's ever going to need and so on, right? Far better to get something out, obviously high quality, well thought through, etc., proofread and so on, but get something out, and then you can always revise it. That's the great thing about these options. You can actually edit it, you can update, do another edition, or you can write another book, in fact. So rather than try to get it all perfect and then sit on it for 5 years, as sort of I did with this one, then really try to get it out ASAP and then move on to the next one, right? So that would be my recommendation if this is a priority for you, and that's a big if. And then finally, this is new. So this is from someone called Phil Jones, who I listened to the other day. He has managed to make his book a massive bestseller in all sorts of ways. And I've listened to his book. But his tip was, you don't want buyers, you want readers, because the best way to spread the word about your book is for someone to go, oh my goodness, you have to read this book. Please say that to people. If I'm, building my own business based on my personal brand and redefining success outside the 9 to 5, etc., then I can very easily say to someone, oh my goodness, if you're thinking about quitting your job, read this book. It's got some amazing stories. They really inspired me and helped me take the leap. Or this is incredible. It's, for less than £10, I'm getting all these comprehensive strategies, and I've now got a really clear vision, clear business plan in place, and I know exactly what I'm doing. Obviously, you'll need more support perhaps, but it's an incredible resource. So far more powerful for people to say, you've got to read this book, to give it to someone else, than, and he gave the example of having piles and piles of books for his friends, and I have a few here that I won't show you, of books that I bought for friends because I was supporting them, which is great, but I haven't read them, and so I can't, in all honesty, write a review, and I'm not going to recommend it to anyone really, apart from sort of sharing on LinkedIn, because I haven't read it. So just like it doesn't really help you to have your friends and family on your email list or following you on Facebook, listening to your podcast actually could help, but you want real listeners. In fact, Amazon, it's all the more important that you have real buyers, because the algorithm then serves people based on their preferences. And if it is your granny who's buying the book and they have very different buying preferences to your ideal customer, that doesn't really work. So think about it as readers. This has also encouraged me to actually send, I've got author copies, so sent sort of signed, personalized editions to people, not worrying too much about if they paid the £5 or the £10, whatever it costs, because it's not about the money so much immediately. It's more about getting that buzz out there, getting it into people's hands, and having people say, and I had someone in my mastermind the other day say, oh, I'm really impressed, this was a new person to me who perhaps wasn't so familiar with my work and so on. So that's a bit about the mindset. Don't try to make it a bestseller. By all means, put everything into it, make it your best effort and so on, but don't think this is the only book you're going to write. You're probably going to write other editions and so on. If if you do want to write that one single book, then yes, maybe take a bit more time to think about it if you're not planning on writing more books, if this is going to be one thing. But generally, and I'll give you some resources later on for people who I've followed as well, the recommendation is actually to go much more specific. So to have more, if I had 5 books, 10 books, rather than how to launch a business, there'd be one book on how to get clear on your business vision. The second book would be how to work on your mindset for your business. The third book would be how to design the right business model. So rather than having all my 5 pillars in one book, I'd then break it down into 5 books, perhaps, or even more specific. And you could even then search optimize the titles to make them really specific, right? So that's less of an ego-driven book. That's more of a sales-driven, practical how-to guide approach. Again, if you want to have the sort of start with why, this is what I want to be known for book, then that's a different story. So hence why you need to be clear on the why, and then work on your mindset as to why are you writing this? Is it just for the ego and prestige of getting on that list, or do you actually want it to be of value to people and to have readers who are going to benefit from it, and for it to have that longevity over the course of your business, rather than just like a quick woohoo, I'm an Amazon bestseller, and then it kind of disappears. So I know a lot of you want to know all the nitty-gritty of the practical stuff. So one more big picture thing, I suppose, to consider is self-publishing versus traditional. Now, I haven't myself experienced traditional. From what I can gather from everything I've learned, and I've researched a lot, and I know people who have traditionally published, traditional publishing sounds really appealing. However, you don't have control over the process and so on, obviously. You don't get a lot of money from it. And they still expect you basically to do the marketing and to have the big audience and so on, right? So yes, they have professional editors and cover designers and all these people, and it's amazing to say I've got a publishing contract, and I will still want to do that at some point. However, I have a client who's got a contract. She's basically on her own for 18 months to write this, and then she's getting a very small commission. It's more something she's doing for personal fulfillment, professional fulfillment, rather than any particular sort of financial goal, certainly. So self-publishing, you've got full control over the process, when, where, what you put in it. I can put my little links into my PDFs or audio guides or programs. I can be as salesy as I want to be, which is not very salesy, but I can use it actually to feed into my program. I get more of the royalties. And, I had a friend of mine who was published traditionally, and he wasn't allowed to, he didn't have the rights to his own book. So he couldn't run a reprint, and the publisher didn't want to because it hadn't sold enough copies. So you kind of lose. That to me is not great, right? You lose access to your own IP. If you do the traditional route, by the way, make sure, I think probably get a lawyer, but make sure you've really read the small print, so you're not kind of selling out your rights to every country, every format, etc., to the publisher for forever, because then you have no control again. So as you can tell, I'm quite a fan of self-publishing. The other thing about self-publishing is that if you then go to an agent, to a publisher, then you can say, hey, I've written these 3 books. They can see that you've got the grit and determination. They can see the quality of your writing. They can maybe see the sales and so on, the audience that you built. And that's a far easier in as well than going just, sort of from a blank slate to an agent or to a publisher to say, oh, please, can you publish? I've never written anything before, but I'd like you to pay me millions of pounds, So that's just that. So again, self-publishing, it's not vanity publishing anymore. It really is respected now. However, there are very low barriers to entry because it's kind of easy to publish something. So all the more important for you to really take it serious and treat it as if it was a professional project, which means having a good cover, editing, no mistakes and so on. I did have one mistake in my first book. I had the date as 2017 instead of 2007, which someone pointed out right away, and I immediately corrected. So only about 15 copies in the world have that error. I'm sure they'll be worth millions in the future. Also, you don't have to start with I think these were like 50,000, 70,000 words book. You can publish a smaller pamphlet. I'm considering now, pamphlet sort of sounds a bit demeaning almost, but a smaller ebook, a smaller the 9 principles of this, the 5 pillars of, it could have been, rather than an actual in-depth comprehensive guide, it could be more about the why. I'm considering more of a little sort of book on more the principles, the philosophy, the mission of redefining success, for example. So that's a different approach. I have always used Amazon for my books. It's I won't say super easy. They've got so many resources. I've been able to download the Word document templates for it. You can obviously sell to a global audience, although Brexit has caused some issues for me now because they're published in the UK, and then my European colleagues have struggled to get copies from there. It's print on demand, and that's a really key concept for you. I don't have to buy 15,000 books that will then sit here unsold, and then I'm sitting on that inventory and I've spent all that money. Print on demand means really somebody orders a book and it's printed for them. So yes, it maybe takes a bit more time, although to be honest, Amazon still says it's 1 or 2 days. But it means that you don't have to have any outlay, right? Depending on the price of the book on Amazon, and you can read all about this. I'm not going to give you all the absolute details on everything, but I'll give you pointers as to where to look. Depending on the price, you'll get either 30% or 70% of the royalties. Again, it's a global market, and it has the Kindle, paperback, hardback, and Audible. However, and I'm going to say this now, because I've only just realized it, and I should have realized it before, some independent bookstores won't want your book if you've been published with Amazon. So that's just a warning, because they feel that Amazon is killing off independent bookstores. Fair enough. And unfortunately, that means, they don't necessarily want to have the big monstrosities. I feel it's a little bit unfair because me, as sort of an independent publisher myself, I don't necessarily have the resources to compete with the big boys unless I do it on Amazon. But that's sort of the lay of the land at the moment. So one of the resources, I'll mention her now because I keep dancing around her. So Joanna Penn, Penn, Creative Pen is her sort of brand name as well. She has a great podcast, really long episodes if you really want to immerse yourself in writing, and website, and several books. I think one of them even is free, I'm sure, a couple. How to self-publish. Might not be fully up to date, I'm not sure, but she certainly has lots of articles on her website. And she's made lots of money publishing all these sort of how-to books. She also is a novelist, so she has the two sides, which is amazing. And her recommendation, as I recently discovered, is to actually do ebooks and books on Amazon, but then do also print books on Ingram Spark. It's called Ingram Spark, so Ingram Spark, which I'm just doing now for my book for the first time. I'm doing well, let's not get into the detail, but I'm doing sort of print on demand there, and I'm not allowing returns, because what you don't want, and again, this is Joanna's recommendation, is people buying 15,000 copies and then not selling them and then sending them back, and suddenly you're stuck with all this inventory again. So this is what I'm trying now. I don't know the result yet, but the advantage of publishing with Ingram Spark is that gives you then broad distribution to all these different bookshops around the world. I'm not sure how much result I will get from it because I'm not a well-known author. I don't know why they would order my book, so I'll let you know how we get on. But that's the new step now for me. So not just Amazon. So Amazon has KDP Select, it's called. You can enroll your ebook into that program for 90 days. It then renews if you want it to. I've cancelled my renew now, because if you are in KDP Select, that's then exclusive to Amazon, which means that you can't sell your ebook anywhere else. If you want to sell it on, Apple or any of the others, and whatever the other book programs are called, you can't do that. But that does give you access to their promotions. People can read your book for free on Kindle Unlimited, and then you get a royalty per sort of number of pages they've read. They have countdown deals. You can do free book promotions and things like that. So there's an advantage to that. So I wrote down here, but I mean, you can research this too. Other ebooks now, I didn't know this. So Kobo, Draft to Digital, Publish, Drive, Street, Lib, Smashwords. These are different publishers for ebooks. I haven't used them, so I'm not endorsing them. Again, for me, KDP, if you search for how to self-publish on Amazon, make sure it's the official KDP site. They have all the guides you need, instructions on how to do the cover, the inside, the different formats, and so on. For those of you who care, when we come to different formats, these books are both 8.5 times 5.5 inches, so 8.5 times 5.5, which I believe was quite a standard business size. They're black and white. Cream interior, I decided, rather than white. White looked a bit scary to me. And matte cover. It can leave marks, but I just like the look of it. So obviously you can go shiny. You can do hardback. I do have a hardback of my first book. And I am going to record an audio version of this one. I didn't do that for the first one because it's a collection of other people's stories, and I feel like it's odd for me to read their stories, and it would be very complex to get everyone to read their own story. But I will certainly do it because I know myself how convenient it is to listen to books on Audible. And the benefit, of course, is you're getting different streams as well. So paperback, ebook, hardback, There's also a large print version you can do, and a workbook version someone recommended. So I could actually make this one, probably I could make it A4, hardback or sort of wire bound. And instead of just having the questions at the end, I could actually make it like a workbook, and that would be another version that people could buy, or even a separate workbook, companion workbook, right? So it's thinking of how can you repurpose and create more income streams around that particular book that you've written. One technicality is that you need an ISBN for your physical books. So I bought mine from Nielsen. I just looked it up. I bought 10 optimistically. I've used, I guess, 2 or maybe 3 of them for £150 at the time. And that's this sort of 13 number figure that you put on the barcode. Then in terms of the actual, well, I should talk about writing, really. I haven't written writing. We'll talk about writing. Let's talk about writing first. The writing process, for me, as many of you will know from sharing on my Instagram and so on, I blocked Thursdays this time around last year, 2022, to write the book. So Thursdays were coffee, cake, go to a cafe, no internet, and I was writing the book. So that was, time blocking is really key. As I always share in my time management trainings, you'll never get this done unless you put it first, because you'll have client calls and workshops and emails and social media and everything else. So if you want to create something like this, like a legacy piece, like a new book, you need to prioritize it. You need to put it first, and you need to really block that time to work. And it doesn't have to be, and probably shouldn't be, 10,000 words a week. But if you can, whatever works for you, consider it. For me, a day a week was enough. And it wasn't even a full day, let's be honest, a few hours a day, a few hours a week, over the course of a year, basically, off and on. For you, maybe you want to compress that. If you don't have children, if you don't have a lot of clients or whatever it is right now, then you can, or if you prefer to do 1,000 words every day, whatever works for you, but try to set yourself a goal and then stick to it, and make it easy. So as I said, Leaving the Corporate 9 to 5 is a collection of interviews. So I did it in 5 sections. People who've moved into a different sector, going freelance, launching your own business, creating a portfolio career, and taking a leap of faith. I did an intro, I did a conclusion, and each section kind of had a little intro and a little conclusion, and that was it, right? And that was 280 pages. Again, I'm just mentioning things that I think are important to realize, but there are instructions of this online. There are things to think about in terms of, you need the title page there. I've got a copyright, so I can't do it because it's blurry. How do I hold it to the camera? How do I hold it so it doesn't go blurry? Wow, okay, that doesn't work. I'll hold it here. Can you see that? Copyright. There's a little dedication. Contents. The contents and all these first thing acknowledgements and so on, they have the Roman numeral pages, and then the rest of the book has normal Arabic numbers, I suppose. And then at the end, in this one, I actually have an index because it's a list of stories, so people can look up the person they know, and there's an about the author section as well. This one I have references because I referenced people and had quotes. And I do also have sort of there's further resources. So I did a list of recommended books on each of the pillars. I believe I used the Chicago manual style of referencing, but make sure if you're using Harvard or Chicago and so on, in terms of using footnotes and endnotes and how they're written with the dates and so on. Of course, you do need to quote and cite and put those references in, so you're not plagiarizing anything. And of course, I have a getting more support as well. So I say, listen to the podcast, get a free scorecard, join the course, and so on. So those are the different sections. And the other piece on making it easy, yes, so this was a collection of interviews. This one, in my case, I had actually done the course already. So I'd recorded the 5 pillars, each of which was 4 videos. And so I was able to put those into, I use Otter, it's an AI transcription, so not perfect, but pretty accurate. I'd used that already for transcriptions for the course. And so I used that as a basis, full transparency, for the book. Now, I don't know exactly how close it was to the original transcript, because I went off freestyling, I added things, took things away. Talking to someone in a course is a very different setting than actually writing. So it still took a lot of work, but at least I had that as a basis. So if you have blog posts, interviews, whatever it is that you already have, videos that you can transcribe, use that as content. There's no reason to start completely from scratch. In fact, I'm reminded in this one, I used some blog articles. Initially, I had a lot packed in there, a lot more. And then I think my coach at the time said, you know, like, people don't want that much. They'll be overwhelmed. It would have been, I don't know, 100,000 words. So I actually took out all that stuff. So I've got plenty of other things that I could say in other books. But again, yeah, you make it easy for yourself. So use what you have if possible. I mean, in terms of the structure of it, and I've got this in the workbook, this is for another day, really. But you really need to think about your why, of course, but think about who is the audience. What's the journey you're going to take them from? So from point A, where are they when they start reading the book, through to point B, where do they want to get to? And then what do they need to know? So in my case, I've got this very well established 5 pillars of building that business outside the 9 to 5. And so that was my structure. Each of those 5 pillars have 4 steps now from my framework, from my course. And again, that then was obviously 5 sections. Each one has 4 chapters, and that was really clearly defined. If you can get to that type of outline, that would be ideal. So chapter headings, sections of the 3 things, 5 things, 7 things, maybe max they need to know, and then break that down into smaller bits. Finally, marketing. So, you know, not to be forgotten, there are lots of guides again and tips on, you know, as I said, how to try to be an Amazon bestseller, etc., etc. I would encourage you to not wait until you've published the book, but really start earlier on. I didn't do this as much as I could have, but if you share the process, people will come along the journey, and they can vote on the topic, maybe not the topic, but at least the title of the book. They can vote on the cover, which I haven't talked about. I'll talk about the cover and the editing in a moment because I've skipped over that. You can, obviously, once you get the proofs and things, you can share an unboxing video. You know, you can even have those sort of that launch team of people who are going to read and review before. Obviously, they can't review before it's been published, but at least on the day, you can have that support team that will help you out. And of course, you know, I used all my established channels. So I've got Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, podcast. I did a podcast mini series, 1 episode on each pillar, which was an extra thing I did. You can do with Kindle, again, you can do like a free Kindle offer for the first week or something like that. I also did, they don't allow you to discount your paperback for some reason, so I put it down just the normal price to half price, and then I put it up to full price. There are also lots of places, for example, Goodreads. You can create an author portal for yourself and put your books there. People can then review them. You can answer interview questions. BookBub is another one, where you can put it to list it for free and people can find it and review it. Again, for my initial book, Leaving the Corporate 9 to 5, I did a lot of research, and a lot of those sites where you can promote your free Kindle, your 99p Kindle. I did author interviews, all sorts. So again, Google that because there are lots of resources on doing those. Marketing, what else? We talked about all those websites. Obviously, you can. So I'm experimenting this time around with a few Amazon ads. They haven't cost me very much at all, so I don't know if I haven't put enough money on them because the impressions aren't very high, but I thought it would be fun to experiment just for the launch month and see what happens. You can do bonuses, so this session is a bonus for those of you who wanted to join, and I also gave the Academy course workbook as a bonus incentive. I don't know how much it drives it, but certainly you can do those kinds of things, get people to join a free training. Obviously, it might help them to buy the book, but also you're getting in front of them and you're demonstrating your expertise and you're telling them more about your program. So they're kind of getting another touch point of knowing you and trusting you and wanting to work with you, hopefully. So just taking one step back in terms of, obviously I talked about writing and then I talked about marketing. So let's just think about the steps in between. The way I've done it is I've not done the cover myself because I'm not a designer. There's a website called 99 Designs, so the number 99 Designs. I've written articles on there, but I've also done my Dreamcatcher logo on there and both book covers here. You can do an auction. No, not an auction. It's called, I suppose, well, it's sort of an auction, a crowdsourcing competition. And you can, I think, choose packages. They have bronze and silver and gold. You can then tell them what you want. If you have an idea, you can give references, you can choose similar designs that you like and so on. And then actually you can have like 30, 40, 50 designers proposing things. You can then give them feedback, get them to rework, use different colors, or I don't like that balloon or whatever it is. And then ultimately you'll choose a certain number to go through to the final round, I think 5, and then you choose a finalist. At that point, you can also poll your audience and see what people think, so make a much bigger thing out of it. I, somewhat foolishly, to motivate myself, did the book cover design competition like a year before I published the book. So I think I lost a bit of momentum, but it was to help me. I wanted to sort of have that as that milestone, as that deadline to work towards, to know that it was there. It also meant that then in the last few weeks, I had to get someone to edit the cover because the book was a different length and I wanted to update the text and so on, right? But 99 Designs is a great place to get the cover designed. You also have formatting and editing. Formatting is the worst part of the whole process, possibly. I have foolishly done it myself. It's time consuming. I used the Amazon template, and I've then used the same template, so both books are very consistent. I'm very proud that the both covers also, they really go together. Hope you noticed. So I've chosen a certain font, obviously. I've got again, it's hard to say, but I've got the book title on the one side and the header, and then the section heading, page numbers and so on. It's really tough. Maybe you're a better word pro than I am. I really struggle. You have to insert section breaks and make sure all this is working, and headers and footers need to not be the same on left and right and all sorts, right? So I would probably definitely recommend that you pay someone to do that. I'm sure you can get someone on Fiverr or similar to do the formatting for you. Obviously, it then needs to be formatted again for Kindle. Kindle, the first time around, I used a program called Kindle Create, which is what Kindle and Amazon recommend. Second time around, I just used Word, and it was fine. I just went through and you remove the page numbers, the headers and footers, adding in links, because obviously in Kindle people can click on the links, and that was it. So that was actually much easier this time round. Finally, editing. Again, I pretty foolishly did the editing myself, partly because I'm a bit arrogant. I'm a good writer and editor, and I feel like, at least from a language standpoint, I can pretty much, I can get it better than anyone I could probably afford to pay to do it. And I'd be really annoyed, and it would just take longer to work with somebody else. If you can get someone, first of all, if it's not your strength, but secondly, really ideally, you should have a professionally edited book. Now, you need to be aware that there are different types of editors. There are content editors who will really look at, is it logically flowing? Is the structure right? And so on. There are then copy editors, and then finally proofreaders. And these are different things. Proofreaders, you can send it to your mom or someone if they're good at picking those things up. But content editing, copy editing, that's a bit more robust. Again, I was a little bit impatient. I just wanted to get this out now by the end of the year. So I didn't want to take the time, I suppose. But if you have the time, if you've done this properly, then you can get those sort of early bird, I suppose, readers on your list. Ask people, and would anyone be interested in reading, draft copies? And, in return, you'd get first access and also these bonuses and so on. And your community then can give you feedback and, hang on, I didn't understand this, or, that's really interesting. Can you talk more about that? And I think that would be a better way of doing it than the way I did it. But again, I was so clear on what I wanted in there. I'd done the course, I had my 5 pillars, so I was very, very specific, and there wasn't so much feedback that I wanted, if I'm honest. So I think that's it. I want to leave it there. I don't want to babble on forever. A few resources that I mentioned: Creative Pen. She has how to self-publish a print book I was looking at now, but her website, thecreativepen.com, her books, her podcasts. There was another book that I'm reminded that I read back in the day. I only read it, 5-6 years ago for the previous book, but Guy Kawasaki, Ape, author, publisher, entrepreneur, how to publish a book. And then if you go to kdp.amazon.com, search, they've got lots of help topics with all the templates and everything that you'll need. Nielsen isbnstore.com is where I got the ISBNs from. So just briefly, the workbook for you. I've got a few questions for you. Why do I want to write a book? Remember, the why is really, really important. What role will it play in my business ecosystem? Big fancy question, but is it going to feed into a program? Is it going to be that point of market entry? Some people put their books at 40, 50 pounds. They're not expecting it to be, you know, a massive bestseller again, but they want to actually earn a bit of money from it, and it fits somehow into their programs in a different way. What do I ultimately want to be known for? So for me, I've got the outside the 9 to 5 message. To be honest, I ultimately want to be known for the bigger topic of reimagining success. So that's going to be my next one. Who is the intended audience? Remember really who you're writing for, because if you're writing for corporate versus individual consumers, if you're writing for someone, in my case, still in their corporate job versus someone who's already started, someone from a marketing background or not, whatever the demographic, the psychographic of your audience, that's really important. And then what is the journey you want to take them on from A, I'm in my corporate job, I kind of want to quit, but I don't know how to do it, through to B, I know what the idea is, I'm really equipped now with frameworks and strategies, and I've got what I need to get started, before perhaps considering working with a coach further on down the line and so on. There's only so much you can do with a book, but certainly that's a great place to start. And then what do they need to know to get there? To get from A to B, they need to know these 3 things, 5 things. Why is this important? What? And then how? That's a framework I often like to use for keynotes and that kind of thing. If you have a framework, if you already have your own proprietary IP, I've got my 5 pillars, you've got the 7 elements of leadership strategy, or you've got your 3 you know, the triangles or whatever it is, your Maslow's hierarchy kind of thing, you know, your particular framework, then that's a great structure, I think, for the book. But what do they need to know to get from point A to point B? And final question for you, is this a priority for me this year? Because I know from speaking to some of you, this is something you've maybe had on the agenda for a while, but doesn't get done. So the question is it a priority? If so, when are you going to block the time to do this, right? And what help do you need to get it done, and so on, as well, as an important question. There are book coaches. I haven't talked about these. There's like book in a box. You can get someone else to write it. You can record, they can transcribe and turn it into a book. I'm assuming, I suppose, that you want to write it yourself. But there are other options as well. So this has been my experience. Again, it's sort of the behind the scenes of my own personal experience as a writer, as someone who's always wanted to be a writer, an author, and someone who is hoping to publish many more books. If that's you, then I hope this has been really insightful for you. And I wish you the best of luck with your book. Let me know how you get on. I'd so love to hear what your biggest insights were and any follow-up questions. You can get me on whatever social channel. If you're on my email list, you can email me, anna@onestepoutside.com as well. Thanks so much for watching, for sticking with me. I think there was a lot in there, so hopefully useful for you. And I look forward to seeing your books sometime in the not so distant future. Thanks so much. Bye for now.